First of all, I move my amendment to the Sinn Féin motion. Thanks to Sinn Féin for bringing forward their motion. I agree with everything that's in it, and I hope they agree with the additions that I have brought to the amendment, which include a very specific step-down subsidy for taxi drivers to allow them to return to work, but where they don't lose their PUP payment if they earn above that. And access to grants to cover the ongoing costs of insurance, car repayments, licence renewal, fuel costs, all those things that they simply cannot cover now, even though those debts and costs are accumulating, given that the work available to them now is 60, 70, 80% less than it was and will remain so as a result of public health measures, which taxi drivers understand, have supported, but they are the economic victims of them and they need support for their support for the public health measures. I've also added that there should be a complete moratorium on the issuing of new licences during the pandemic, and that there should be a scheme for taxi drivers who may, for health or other reasons, wish to exit the industry to be able to buy, for the NTA to buy back their licence so that they can cover the investment they made to get into the industry in the first place, as well as the other demands that are included in the motion. Now, Minister, yesterday's magnificent taxi protest was the biggest taxi protest that has ever taken place in this state. It dwarfed the expectations of the organisers. It was, you know, in every sense, it was a brilliant show of solidarity. Men, women, black, white, brown, united as taxi drivers, as people whose livelihoods have been devastated as a result of public health measures, and who are pleading with the government, but soon they will be demanding that the government reciprocate the solidarity they have shown with real supports. And I want to stress to the Minister, the taxi drivers' first impulse was not to protest, and I know this because I met with the 4 groups who organised it months ago, where we discussed what to do about their plight. And they asked that we would request that they go before the COVID committee, and that I would bring their demands, as I've done repeatedly, to the Taoiseach, current and past, and Ministers for Transport and Ministers for Finance, and bring their demands into the COVID committee, because they hoped if they set out their plight, a reasonable government would understand it and respond. And they hoped they wouldn't need to have to protest. And they debated long and hard about protesting at all. But finally, when it became clear that despite a lot of tea and sympathy from the government, and lots of tea and sympathy at the COVID committee, that absolutely nothing was forthcoming for them in the July stimulus, and no clear commitments to give them the income subsidies they need, to give them access to the grants they need to cover their costs, to issue the moratorium on licences, to extend the 10-year rule for the replacement of their vehicles, and critically, to dissolve the Taxi Advisory Committee, which has failed as a representative organisation for taxis, had barely any taxi representative on it in the first place, and establish a genuinely representative national taxi transport forum where the voices of the taxi drivers themselves can actually be heard, and where their representatives are the people who put forward their case. All of this has been ignored by the government. 7 and 3. All of this has been ignored, and now the Damocles sword hangs over them of your plans to cut the PUP tomorrow. Also affecting other workers, I just came from another demonstration of events workers. 22,000 taxi drivers and their families, 35,000 events and music workers, musicians, crew and so on. The axe is going to fall on them. Their income is going to be slashed on top of their livelihoods already being devastated, and they are put between the devil of the deep blue sea. Do we stay on a reducing payment, plunged into poverty, or do we go back to work where there's only 20 or 30% of the available work we used to have, be plunged into poverty and lose the payment? So what part of income subsidy does the government not understand? But it understands it for big business. Billions has been thrown in double quick time at big corporations, often very profitable corporations, with much bigger capacity to absorb accumulated costs during the pandemic. Big cash reserves, they get billions. But the taxi drivers, who have no absorbers, if you like, and no buffers at all, get nothing. And the events and arts and music people get nothing. Now, it's not good enough, and I can tell you, I know because I've been working closely with the taxi groups, they will be back. They will be back. And if this government fails to respond to their just and fair demands and show them some respect for what they do, and if Minister Ryan doesn't learn that they are an integral part of the public transport system, he doesn't seem to even understand that. They're the people who take us home late at night, to our door, the only door-to-door transport service that exists. They take people from airports, they take kids to school, they take disabled and elderly people places where buses can't take them. They work the unsocial hours, and they do it for very, very little. And all they are asking is for a helping hand and some measures that wouldn't even cost the government anything in order to help them through this and show them a bit of respect. So that's what we're asking, Minister, and we don't need more sympathy or this frankly insulting government amendment, which should be withdrawn, because it doesn't address their concerns. They will be back outside Leinster House and surrounding these buildings in the next short while if you don't show them some respect, give them some support, and withdraw the threat of cutting their incomes tomorrow, which will plunge them even further onto their knees.
Thank you. Just a technical. You moved your amendment, and you can't do that technically because the first amendment has already been moved by the Minister.